Hello, welcome to the Black and Blue Collar Reader. My name is Dan. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I am going to give you a little background into my reading journey. So let's just get right into it, right? As a child, I don't really remember being read to, and I don't really remember any books that I've read from, I would say, 1 to 10. But at the age of 10, I moved in with my aunt and my grandmother, who took care of me for basically the rest of my life. And my aunt was an avid reader. She was a mystery person. She liked Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes books. So she attempted to get me into reading, but I was 10 and kind of a messed up kid. And I do remember her, getting Shel Silverstein and The Giving Tree. And I remember The Giving Tree having like quite an effect on me. If you guys never read that book, go read The Giving Tree. It's pretty good and definitely a sad book, especially if you're older. So when I got into high school, I started to find myself, and I found Led Zeppelin. And most people know that in Ramble On, there's a lyric that says, "In the darkest depths of Mordor." And my aunt was like, "Do you know that's from The Lord of the Rings?" And of course, she went out and got me those books. And I read those books, and I did not like them. I was 16, 17. I had the attention span of a 3-year-old in a shiny candy store. So I did not appreciate that book. I wanted the action. I wanted people getting slain and all that, really good stuff. And I wasn't able to fully comprehend the work of Tolkien at that time. But I did start reading, rock and roll documentaries. So as I mentioned, being a Led Zeppelin fan, I had to get Hammer of the Gods. I also had to get, break on through to the other side, documentary on or a biography on Jim Morrison, and of course, one of my favorites. I had to get an autobiography on Janis Joplin Pearl. So I remember reading those books. I also remember reading Jack Kerouac on the Road and Siddhartha, I believe, by Herman Hesse. But it didn't connect with me. And through high school, I did not read that much. And then I got to college. And of course, I read for college when I went to college a little later in life. I think I was 21 when I really started to go to college full time. And I studied sociology. And of course, I read sociology books. There was a book called Being Black and Living in the Red. I do remember reading Plato's Republic and it being a sort of manuscript on how to build a society, like the Bible may have been. So yeah, I do remember those books, but I'm going to touch on this really quickly. So in my 20s, I not only started my journey into life, but I started my journey into becoming an addict. And by 27, I was a full blown addict. I couldn't take care of myself, and nothing mattered but my next hit or drug. And I did not get the help that I needed until 37. And the only thing that I read within that time was Harry Potter. Go figure. I read Harry Potter, An Active Addiction, and I loved it. I started, I watched the first 3 movies, and then I read A Goblet of Fire, which is still my favorite book because that was the first book, not my favorite book of all time, but my favorite book in that series. And I'm still a Harry Potter fan to this day. I got the Dark Lord wand. I have my kids call me Daddy Dark Lord when I punish them, and I love it. And if you've seen some of my videos, you'll know I'm still a kid at heart, and I love Harry Potter. So, I did read Harry Potter, and there were times when, I was in a place with no electricity, and I was renting books from the library, and I read a few books, one of them being A Game of Thrones. But once I got out and I started my journey into becoming well again and into my recovery, you start to find yourself again, and you start to find the things that you were interested in before you lost yourself in that world that I was in my 20s and 30s. And I was a Game of Thrones fan. Like that show, I was just like, this was made for me. That show was amazing. So obviously, within the first 3 years of my recovery, my brain started to get a little bit better. So even in the early recovery, when I started to read, they give you books in recovery to read, and I wasn't retaining anything. Again, I did not have the patience. I couldn't retain information. I couldn't tell you what I read 4 seconds ago. But as my brain started to develop and get healthier, I started to get better with my reading. So obviously, I went out and got this. And you can tell it got read, right? Storm of Swords got beat up because, I didn't have a license at the time, and I was riding the bus to work, and I got caught in the rain, and Storm of Swords got messed up, to say the least. But, I love these books. They were great, but I was still early in my recovery. My brain was still developing, and those slog points were killing me sometimes, though I did push through and I did continue to read, and I loved it. And hey, I don't care what you guys say about the show. Like, yeah, that 7 and 8 were not the best, seasons of that show, but don't take nothing away from 1 through 5 because they were amazing, and don't take nothing away from this series just because we've been waiting 90 years for this last one, right? This series was still phenomenal. Obviously, Tyrion Lannister is going to be one of my favorite characters ever in fantasy. And Arya is right there, as well as the Hound. The Hound, F the King. I love that. These were some excellent, this was excellent character work, excellent world building, and just amazing writing. And as I started to grow more and more, and of course this disappeared, I had to find something else. And when you get out into the Twitter sphere and you look up best fantasy authors, best fantasy books, who magically appears? But these guys. So I typed it in, and of course, Brandon Sanderson, that's the greatest fantasy author. And then we got Rothfuss. He is just a master at writing. And I was like, all right, let's get these books. So I believe I started first off with The Name of the Wind. And I enjoyed it. It wasn't that bad. The writing was actually very well done. Everybody knows that. And then, of course, I had to get the second one, Wise Man's Fear. And I enjoyed the second one, except for there's a twist in this book where we just do a whole 360 and we end up somewhere else. And if you read this book, you probably know what I'm talking about. But hey, I know that had to happen. But, I didn't like it that much. So I also got into Brando Sando over here. And I got to say, the magic system in Mistborn is still one of the best magic systems I have ever read. The action scenes were exceptional. The character work, not so much. The writing, not so much. And I know that he grows. So obviously, I went and I got, this guy right here. And I loved, and let me make sure I'm doing, I thought The Way of Kings was great. I loved Word of Radiance, and I DNF'd Oathbringer. I was over it. I was over the grand scale, the redundancy, the, just packing words into situations that didn't need to happen. In my opinion, I DNF'd Oathbringer. And of course, I heard about Wheel of Time. And I am not a person for bickering teenagers. The story was okay. The second book was probably my favorite of these three. There's a battle at the end that I really enjoyed. But I just couldn't connect with these characters. And it's probably because of my history. I'm older and I want some real people. So I went out into BookTube and I was told, I learned about Grimdark. And that's when I found this guy, The Broken Empire by Mark Lawrence. And Jord was a character that I could relate to. Jord was flawed. As you know, I just told you I'm a flawed individual in more ways than seven. So Jord was somebody that I connected with. And I like being in his sadistic head. And there are parts in this book that made my stomach turn. And I enjoyed them. I don't know why. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm messed up. I know I'm messed up. So that's why I really enjoyed this series. And then, I had to find more. But my reading journey, I did not kick off my reading journey and become addicted to reading until I found this guy. Yes, the Dark Lord himself, Joe Abercrombie. When I read this book, all of a sudden the floodgates opened. And of course, next thing you know, Accio, rest of them. And I've got the next couple. And they were just the character where I'm a character driven reader. This is something that I've recently come to learn, that I love me a good character. I love me a good dark character, a morally gray character who is working through some shit, because I have worked through some shit in my time. So Glutka, Logan, Nine Fingers, their redemptions just freaking hit home for me. Yes, the first book, The Blade itself, was on plot, but the character work is next level. The humor was next level. The second book, Before They Are Hanged, is probably my favorite book of the series. And then, of course, we have the standalones, where the Snake of Talons and what's his name? And Shivers. Yes. I've never read a revenge tale. So that was my favorite standalone. I thought it was awesome. So, I know there's a bunch of people out there that's read plenty of revenge tales. This was my first, and this is the one that I'm going to remember because I loved it. Heroes, Red Country, man, I obviously I loved it. There's a thing in Heroes where the POVs are changing in battle. Nah, it was so well done. And this just opened the floodgates. And all of a sudden, I had to go out there and get more grim dark. So I got these. And I just started avidly reading. I was in it for the long haul. I was no longer watching TV, and it was reading all day, all night. If I had the time between parenting, work, and babysitting my doggies, I was going to read. And this series right here, The Band, amazing. I told you about, my love for classic rock and roll. Kings of the Wild had so many tidbits of rock and roll. Lead character's name is Slowhand. If you're an Eric Clapton fan, you'll know who that is. And, maybe this is a hot take, but, I love Bloody Rose more than I love Kings of the Wild. In Kings of the Wild, we had, old timers who have lived their regrets and their pain and are past all that, and they're trying to go out to relive one more act of glory. But in Bloody Rose, we are with the characters as they go through their pain and regret. And the ending of Kings of the Wild kind of cut real short for me. But the ending of Bloody Rose I thought was awesome. There's a character in this too whose tattoos come to life. That was fire. I liked Bloody Rose a little more than I liked Kings of the Wild. Also, we got into, I got into BookTube, and of course, you can't go on BookTube without running into my man, right? So I got the Forgetting Moon, I got Lonesome Crown and The Blackest Heart, and I've read these two. So it does have those teenage bickering moments, but he flips some tropes on their head. The religion, I think they're called epigraphs in the beginning, was done so well. We do have like a different, it's based on kind of a Christianity religion, but the First Testament and Old Testament, they're all looked at differently across the spectrum. Like we have Catholicism, we have Christianity, Judaism, and it's interesting because that is what happens in this book. Everybody interprets the text differently, and that happens in these books, and I really loved how that's done. It's gory, it's grimdark, and I can't, I'm going to read the third one. Also, I did check out this gentleman right here. I hope everybody goes and checks him out. His name is Daniel Polanski. This is the Lowtown trilogy. It's kind of a crime noir type fantasy. Your POV is a boss drug dealer in a low part of town, if you can't tell, Lowtown. And there's some magic involved. There's a mage in this called Maisie. Woo! Get to that last book. There's a scene with her that's amazing. Also, within all this, I found, my favorite author. And here he is. Yes, I found R. Scott Baker's The Second Apocalypse series. I was warned by some people out in the booktube community to get my reading muscles up before I jumped into a series of this nature. And I did that. And man, what an amazing ride. Yes, there are difficult prose. The man's vocabulary is next level. So that helped me in my reading journey. I ask Alexa for word definitions constantly, and I am rereading the prose. I'm learning to slow down and make every word count. And Baker's series has done that for me. It is dark. It is gritty. It is introspective. It's philosophical. It's just everything I feel a modern fantasy should be, with some traditional fantasy, tropes thrown in there. This is just the pinnacle of fantasy for me at this time. So you've actually gotten a view of all the books that I have read in my recovery. And also, you've seen my videos. I also do some other things, I'm getting into Malazan. I think Erickson is amazing. His writing is a particular taste. Plot lines end, and then they come back like another book later, and you end up with different characters every book. But hey, that makes it more intriguing. You are starting off a new book. The Five Warrior Angels, we pick up with all the same characters, so there's no intrigue, and we pick up in all the same areas, so there's no intrigue there. You lose that when you get to a second book in the series. But with Erickson, you're hit again and again and again with new people, new places, new plots, and it's that feeling of, I hate this, newness, of intrigue that you get when you jump into another book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I love this series already. I had to put down Memories of Ice for a readathon, and it hurt my heart, man. It hurt my heart. But I'll get into it in May. Also, Pratchett, man. I enjoy Pratchett a lot. I am going to read another book of his. And from what I've read of the, Pratchett has withstood the test of time. His issues that he addresses in these books, inequality, racism, sexism, these are still issues that we deal with today. And Pratchett was writing these books in the 90s and the early 2000s, and they're still issues to this day. And he put such a whimsical, comedic spin on it, but they are serious topics, and I just love how he does it. Guards was amazing. Captain Vine, everybody talks about Captain Vines, bro. Nobody gives my boy Nobby some credit. Nobby was hysterical. I love Nobby. There's a part in this book with a protective device that just had me crying. I was laughing so much. And of course, I'm jumping into indie authors and stuff. Beyond Redemption by Michael R. Fletcher was amazing. I've already bought more books from him. And our Rob J. Hayes was my last review, and that was amazing. So hey, you guys have all just witnessed every book that I have read in the last 3 years. And you are all, if you join me in this channel, are going to be growing as I grow as a reader. And I hope you guys join me, like, subscribe, do everything that they tell you. Check me out, and drop me comments. Let me know some of your favorite series so that I can go check those out. I'm currently reading We Are the Dead. Wow, what a good book. I can't wait to get more into that. And I can't wait to just keep, going on this reading journey. And I hope you guys will join me. So I say this on all my videos. Let's keep growing to be better people. Let's keep growing to be better readers. And I will see you guys on the flip side.
Everything that happens is motivation.